So Brian Azzarello's Joker is an amazing story for two reasons. One, because it tells the story of a guy who tried to be the Joker's friend, and two, it gives us like the deadliest and most insane version of the Joker that I think we've ever seen in the history of DC Comics. So what this does here is this opens up with a guy named Johnny Frost, who's basically narrating what's going on. And he's the guy that tried to be Joker's friend, right? He's going to give us this narration over the course of the story because it's all pretty much from his perspective. But what he says here is the news, when it came, spread from the back alleys to the social clubs, through rooms where everything you'd ever want was for sale, to the confessionals where it was all paid for. It spread like wildfire, or more aptly put, a disease. And he says that's what he is, I guess, a disease that infected Gotham City, of which there is no cure. And it's Johnny alongside another guy named Monty. And for those of you guys who know what happens to Monty, man, it's brutal. But like, they're having this discussion about the fact that like the Joker is getting out, right? And somebody has to go and get him. And it's awesome the way that it's done, because Johnny says he was a disease that somehow, with the help of God or the devil, pick your poison, had convinced his doctors he was not diseased anymore. The news spread. I don't know the particulars, still don't as to why, but he was. The Joker was being released from Arkham Asylum. And it's the coolest thing here, right? The idea that the Joker is this presence of such significance that when he gets out of Arkham, it sends a literal chill through the spine of the entire city of Gotham. Because we're going to see pretty much all the major players from Batman's Rogues Gallery here. The Penguin, Two-Face especially. You're not really going to see like Mr. Freeze or anybody like that. But it is cool because what Johnny talks about is that he's almost kind of enamored, right? He's like, I have to admit, seeing him in person for the first time, I felt that instinctual clinch, you know, down there. But then he saluted the city, which put my mind, among other things, at ease. And so the Joker kind of gets to know Johnny, and he asks him what his name is, right? And he's just like, my name's Johnny Frost. And the funny thing about that is Joker just starts calling him Johnny for the rest of the story. It's kind of cool. But like, he asked him like, do you have a gun? And Johnny's like, yeah. And Johnny asked the Joker, do you need it? And that's where the Joker's just kind of like, I really like you, man. Like, let me have that gun. And then they go to the car, and the Joker points over to another car that's watching him. And where Johnny asks, like, do you know who they are? The Joker's like, thugs, certainly, maybe they're cops. He's like, I don't know. We'll see. And so they pop the trunk, and Joker takes the shovel, has it wrapped in a kind of cloth, and then they just don't do anything with it, right? Like, seemingly they just kind of put it in the car, and like Joker rides shotgun. And one of the things that Frost talks about, right, that Johnny discusses here, is that as they were driving, the men with guns followed them at kind of a respectable distance away from Arkham and across the Wayne County Bridge. But when we turned west, they kept going north. They blinked, and Joker just kind of giggled, right? Or maybe it was a phlegm. He didn't quite know how to make out his joke. But what ends up happening is the first stop that Joker makes is he shows up to what's basically the lair, or whatever you want to call it, for Killer Croc. Now, one of the coolest things here is that Killer Croc in this story is not really depicted as this monstrous kind of guy. Instead, he's just like a dude that has a physical skin condition that basically gives him reptilian skin. What's really also cool is the way that Joker and Killer Croc relate to each other. But there's a kind of banter between these guys, right? And maybe it's just due to like their history together, whatever the case happens to be. And so when Joker walks in, Killer Croc's like, I heard you were getting out. Tell me how you manage that. And the response of the Joker is, no, I don't think I will. And so where Croc's like, what brings you around here? The response of the Joker is like, I always like to see you. And Killer Croc's like, why? And the Joker's like, because you make me feel handsome. So they're just kind of like busting each other's balls. And so at the end of the day, right, like there's a kind of conversation about the Joker getting in on like this poker game and things like that. And Joker's like, I don't necessarily have any money. And he's like, you know, is there any real scores around here to be had? And so they end up kind of like planning one, right? Like actually going on a bit of a campaign. Now, what this does and what it shows is that Killer Croc, yes, he has his own crew, but still he's kind of a low-level henchman because he basically comes under the employ of the Joker as what's basically his hired muscle. And so it is kind of cool to see him played out in that way. But one of the things that goes on is for the character of Johnny, when he looks at all of this, he's enamored by this lifestyle. He's enamored by what it is. He says, my name is Johnny Frost. You don't know me, but all my life, I knew you would. That I'd do something, I would be somebody. that you'd know and take notice. A big man, front row seats, nice suits, my own booths at the toniest restaurant in town. Somebody. And he says, not some two-bit hood hustling small potatoes wouldn't satisfy a starving Irishman. This is Johnny's desire to make it big time. And he sees the Joker as his key to do it. And so what happens is, following meeting with Killer Croc, they end up going to this kind of bar, right? Grin and Bear It bar. And Joker meets with Monty. And again, here's the crazy thing, is because in the midst of all of this, Harley Quinn is there. She's just kind of at the bar, just chilling and sort of doing her own thing. The funny thing about Harley, and even Batman by extension, they're there, but it's not until the very end that Batman actually becomes meaningful in the story. And it's not really until a future point in the story involving Two-Face that Harley Quinn is actually significant. For the most part, she's just kind of a background character in all of this. But when the Joker shows up, he starts talking to Monty, and Monty's like, oh yeah, man, we gotta celebrate, right? Because you're out, you know, we gotta enjoy the moment, right? And for the most part, they do, right? Harley Quinn, basically being a exotic dancer, ends up getting up on stage and dancing for everybody. And this is one of the crazy moments, because depending on who you talk to, there's different interpretations to this. So some will say that the Joker did what he did because of why Monty was looking at Harley Quinn. And other people will say the Joker did what he did because of what Monty did to him, which you guys will see what I'm talking about as we go on. The point being that Harley Quinn gets up there on stage and she starts dancing, and Monty is just like totally into it, right? Just gushing over this girl. And what he does is he looks at Johnny and he's like, hey Johnny, like, do you have $1 in your pocket? And Johnny's like, yeah. And he's like, give me the $1, right? And so of course the $1's given to the Joker, and then the Joker leads Monty into a back room. Now, while they're back there, Johnny's kind of out front, right? And he's like, I'm not what I was. I'd sign that away on a dotted line, a salute to my past. Forget that. I was part of one hell of a party, just kind of lavishing over this life and what it represents. But then everybody's totally taken by surprise when Monty is marched out on the stage by the Joker, having been flayed alive. Like, he's just kind of staggering out there. The Joker takes the $1 and just smacks it on his back end. And like Killer Croc and those guys are just kind of laughing about it. So while Monty lays there dying on this stage, the Joker makes this speech to everybody and he says, I'm very distressed. You can see it in my face, I'm sure. When I went away, I thought I was leaving my city in capable hands, but it seems other hands have taken it from me. And you know what those other hands did? They loosened their belt around their fat waists and they took a dump. In my city, my sandbox, mine. Gotham belongs to me. So who here wants to help me get it back? And that's when you really start to get into like the character of Johnny, where he's like, I do, Johnny does, right? He's just obsessed with this idea. Now what you do is you switch over to Two-Face for a moment, where Two-Face gets a phone call that Joker has been let out. And so at that point, it really concerns Two-Face to an extreme degree, because what happens is that while Johnny and Joker are hanging out with each other, the extreme nature of the Joker terrifies Johnny, but at the same time, it also excites him. And a really good example of this is when Joker talks about how nervous Johnny is, because he's now the chauffeur for the Joker. And you have like Harley Quinn and Joker in the back of the car, and they're being driven to a bank. And so Joker kind of makes this comment and he's like, you're sweating, Johnny. And Johnny's like, I mean, really? You know, I guess I'm just a little hungover. And the response of the Joker is, we did hang the cats out to dry last night, didn't we? And he says, I woke up with that not so fresh feeling myself. You should have told me you were in the same straits. Here, stick these in your hole, right? And where Johnny's like, I mean, I can't really take pills. This is when the Joker kind of goes nuts. He's like, why? You know, they fix things. I've lived with them for years, right? Pills, pills, pills. They pry open your mind with fingers and, are you saying you're better than me? And just like grabs Johnny and just kind of goes nuts, right? Like in that moment, like just these extreme mood swings. One moment, he's just like, yeah, man, we're having a great time. The next, he's just like, why are you looking at me that way? And it's that kind of craziness of the Joker, but it doesn't really deter Johnny in any meaningful way, because his response here is like, I mean, I can't swallow him dry, right? And so the Joker's like, oh, well, that makes sense, right? Here, hair of the dog, right? You know, swallow these. And then in turn, like Harley Quinn puts on these like, these like Robert De Niro casino shades, you know, like just puts these things on his face, and Joker just like goes in. And what's kind of nuts is Johnny comments on this. this, right? He's like sweating. Yeah, I was sweating like a nun in a sauna, and booze had nothing to do with it. Joker was broke. All the cash, all his holdings, all his territory, everything that he had was gone, divvied up by men who thought they'd seen him for the last time. But instead of going after them, he decided to rob a bank. So yeah, I was sweating because none of this really seemed to make any sense. Now, there is a little bit of a backstory here that is given to Johnny. The only thing we really learn here is that Johnny has kind of been in and out of prison a few times. And his girl Shelly, who actually kind of becomes a pretty twisted part of this story later on, she ends up serving him divorce papers, right? So all it's really designed to do is to say that this guy's life is just a trash heap, right? In and out of prison all the time. He's a small time player. He'll never really make it big time is the implication. And his own girl doesn't want to have anything to do with him. But the other problem here is that she's got her own sets of issues, right? I mean, she's going nowhere in life as well. And so it's just kind of a little indication of the fact that this is his one shot to actually make it, is how he sees it. And so all that happens here is the Joker just like walks out of the bank with like a bag full of money. And it's just like, drive. And where Johnny's like, how'd it go? The response of the Joker is just like, good, but not great, right? It was good, but it was boring. The alarm wasn't tripped. We got all our money, but nobody died. Maybe next time, right? He's just like, get rid of this. And he just hands him this picture. And where Johnny's like, I mean, what is this? The Joker's like, it's a picture of the bank president's daughter. And where Johnny's just like, dude, are you kidding me? The Joker's like, I mean, of course I am, right? Like, I dig driving people, Johnny, so drive me, right? It's kind of nuts the way the Joker happens. And that's one of the things that I want you to notice over this. The Joker's just gonna be crazy. He's gonna say things that just don't make any sense because this story perfectly encapsulates how insane the Joker is. And so again, Johnny comments and he says, and drive I did, because one thing I got is drive. First to a sporting goods store of all places, didn't take Joker for much of a sportsman, but hell, every man needs a hobby. And so you pick up with a Joker who's just like fishing, right? Like just out there in Gotham here. And so you have Johnny who's just kind of like, you're not gonna catch a whole lot with that. And in turn, Joker's like, I mean, do you think I should use like sugar instead? But it leads to Johnny saying like, somebody's coming. And that's when we're introduced to the Penguin, Oswald Cobblepot. Although in this story, Joker refers to him as Abner. But again, like Killer Croc is the one that's going and getting these guys and bringing them to Joker himself. Now, the Penguin, as you traditionally know him, right, running the Iceberg Lounge and like this major player in the criminal underworld who's basically a mob boss, right? He's the closest you get in Gotham City to like the Godfather, right? That kind of traditional mob boss. He's not really that guy. He's a high-level accountant who basically launders money for people. And that's what he does here, right? That's what Joker tells him. Like, you're gonna launder money for me. And where the Penguin's just kind of like, I mean, you know, I don't really know if I wanna do that. The response of Joker is like, feel my muscle, right? And what happens is Penguin's just like, I mean, what are you talking about? Like he goes to feel the Joker's arm and the Joker's like, no, not that one, that one. And like Killer Croc wraps his arm around the Penguin's neck and he's just like, show him what's in the bag, Johnny. And like Johnny cracks the bag open, right? All this hard cash from a bank. And the Joker's like, that's all I have. I'd like you to invest it for me, looking for a high yield, say 10 times as much. Quick turnaround too. Do you think you can do it? And he's like, all I ask is that you try, but I have confidence in you as businessman, as facilitator. There's not a nickel changes hands in Gotham that does not have a greasy print from your fat sausages on it. So do we have a deal? Because if you tell me no, I'm gonna kill you and then I'm gonna use you as bait and I'm gonna fish and I'm gonna grab some fish and that's gonna be it. Right? It's a very, very intimidating thing. It's cool because it's all the stuff the Joker doesn't say and implies that makes the situation so dangerous. And so following that, what you do is you switch over to Johnny when he gets back to his place. And again, he offers more of this commentary where he says, Joker had me take him and his lady back to their crib. As they were getting out of my ride, he asked me if there was anything at my own I had to have. I hesitated to answer. Then he gave me a squeeze and stressed that only what you have to have, then walk away. I said, sure. I understood I would be staying with him now, right? Grab what you need. You're staying with me, Johnny. And so it's cool. And he says, my mistake was hesitating, because what happens is when he gets back to his place to grab his stuff, he's met by basically a crooked cop. This guy will return, but this is the first in several people who warn Johnny, where they're like, you don't know what you're messing with, right? Like you think that you're becoming an equal partner with the Joker. You think you're becoming his friend. And sure, on some level, you're earning his trust, but you don't really understand the Joker. You don't really grasp what it is that you're doing. You're looking at this from a rational situation, but it's not. And so ultimately the guy leaves, you know, after kind of taunting Johnny a little bit. And then you switch over with Johnny driving the Joker around. Now, this is when you get your first real reference to Batman. And it's one of the reasons why I love this comic so much, because Batman's not a major focus in it. And so what you get is Johnny, when he's talking to the Joker, he says, "It's all set up, Joker. Tommy Bang Bang will meet with us. Though if you don't mind me saying, letting him know we're coming could mean that we're walking into a setup." And Joker kind of comments about how it's all so obvious and different things like that. But that's when his attention shifts. And he's like, "Look outside, Johnny, right? Look out the window. Tell me what you see." And Johnny's like, "I see lights." And Joker just kind of starts laughing a little bit. And he's like, "No, no, 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 no. In the dark, right? He's out there. You know that, Johnny, right on the other side of this window, watching me. Let's go to work." And so it's not this great big huge thing, but like, it's basically kind of Joker, quote unquote, rebuilding his empire. But in the back of his head, he knows Batman's out there watching him, monitoring him to see if he goes and does anything crazy and starts killing people. It's really, really cool. I don't know why, but it's just so awesome that Batman's just kind of this behind the scenes figure, always lurking there. And the Joker sees him that way. And so what ends up happening is when they get into like the office, right, the hotel room, club, whatever, where Tommy Bang Bang is, that like the Joker walks in and immediately kind of starts taunting people, and there's joking and there's carrying on and there's laughter. But the whole mood has this feeling of like everybody's laughing, but they're all laughing nervously, right? Like, ha 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 ha. They're all kind of looking at each other like, do we need to worry about things popping off? Right? That's really what this whole situation is. And so Tommy ends up apologizing here. He was like, "Look, man, when things went down, it wasn't my call, but I did take a piece of what you had," right? And Joker's just kind of like, "You would have been a fool not to," right? And Tommy's just kind of like, "Yeah, man, I got the garbage on the east side and the shakedowns too. That's all. It's yours again. I was just keeping it warm for you, right? Here's your cut," right? And so the Joker says, "I'd like your crew to run it for me still," right? "They can be trusted, right? Because I get a whiff of skimming. It's like my boogers are turning to crap." And so Tommy's just like, "No, no, no, no. You don't ever have to worry about anything like that from us." And so the Joker says, "Okay, cool. So like 10 for you, 5 for your guys." And it's just kind of like, wow, man, that's generous, right? Like Joker's giving us a good chunk of money, right? 10 grand for me, 5 grand for my guys. Like the Joker knows how to take care of his guys. And so they leave, right? They just kind of walk away. And it's kind of cool because Joker is talking to Johnny and he's like, "You know what? Go get in the car, right? Go get the car warmed up. There's something I forgot to do." Joker walks back in with what is probably the biggest hand cannon I've ever seen. And he just tells Tommy, 10% is now off the table. 5 for the time being. Still stands, gentlemen, and kills Tommy on the spot, which is basically the Joker's way of saying, like, you guys all work for me, right? That's the way that it is. And so what happens is when Joker comes out, he just kind of like starts going nuts, right? Puts the can in his mouth and all that kind of stuff. And it was like, "Not enough work for you, huh? Need me for more of your dirty work. I admit I aimed low," right? And it's just screaming out into the ether. And like the whole time Johnny's watching this and he's like, I don't know what he was thinking or if he even was. Joker, I was learning, was not about thinking. And so what happens following this is it's like The Godfather, right? The end of the first film when Michael Corleone is like, "Today we settle all family business," when he takes out his wife's husband. But up to that, he kills like the heads of the 5 families, right? Strachey and Mo Green and all those guys, Barzini and everything. That's what happens here. The Joker goes after every single mid-level boss and every high-level boss. Anybody who took a piece of his turf, all family business gets taken care of here. And that's when you switch over to Johnny, whose britches get a little big because he goes walking in to where Killer Croc is and he's like, "Let's go." And Killer Croc's like, "What?" He's like, "I'm not done eating." And Johnny's like, "Yes, brother, you are," and like takes his plate away. And Killer Croc just grabs him and he's like, "No, I'm not." And Johnny's like, "Man, you know who I work for, right?" And Killer Croc is just like, "Are you serious? You think you're a worker?" He's like, "Dude, you have no idea, do you? You have no idea what's going on here, do you?" He's like, "I'm working. You just hang tight. You have no idea what you are in all of this. Yeah, Joker's friend. Huh, fat chance of that." And he's like, "You hang there on a meat hook. I'm gonna finish my meal." And so they do, right? And of course, that leads to Killer Croc and them showing up late. And Joker's just kind of like, "I mean, I thought I kept you waiting," right? The response of Killer Croc is, "Yeah, it's all good, man." Like Joker doesn't care that Killer Croc is late. And Johnny doesn't tell the Joker about what happened between himself and Killer Croc. And so what ends up happening here is there's a kind of exchange, right, that takes place where initially you have the Joker meeting with the Penguin to basically pick up his money that's been laundered here. And that the Penguin tells Joker Two-Face is still like your main competition. He took over pretty much everything, right? All these low-level bosses and mid-level bosses, they all worked for him. He's the one that took the greatest share of your territory. So like, he's your main guy, but he's avoiding you. He's not going to take your call, right? And so Joker's just kind of like, I mean, we'll see. me, right? Because one of the cool things here is Joker talks about Two-Face in pluralities, right? Like we'll see which one of the Harveys will answer me when I call. And so Joker does call and like Harvey never answers, right? He just doesn't respond to him. And so that's when you get another indication of him just kind of being crazy because he's just sort of like, okay, like, all right, I guess Harvey's not going to take my call, you know, like that's weird, you know, and Johnny's just kind of like, huh, that's strange. And Joker's like, yeah, I mean, that's the thing, Johnny, right? Like Harvey's a guy that normally takes a call because he's got a thing about being called on. His face complexion, confidence issues, I feel bad for him half the time. And then he just starts smashing the phone, right? Just like flips out in a rage. He's like, all right, Harvey, like, you want to be tough guys about this? He's like, fine, we can do that. And just starts like trashing the bar. And one of the guys is just like, all right, man, I need to get out of here. Like, we should go because like this guy's having an episode. And Joker's like, no, man, stay. Like have a drink, right? I'm sorry, have a drink. And just like smashes the beer bottle on the table and just starts stabbing the guy in the head with it, right? And is like, 2 against 1, Harveys? That's the way you want to play Gotham? And he's just like losing his mind. And like Johnny's never seen anything like this before. And so what happens is Joker's just like, if that's how it's going to be, then that's how it's going to be. And so what follows is you have Johnny, who's actually called on by Harvey Dent. He calls him into the office, right? Now, this is going to be a very important plot point to what goes on later when it comes to like Johnny's ex-girl, Shelly. But like what happens is Two-Face brings him in and is like, look, man, you don't know who you're screwing with. Right? Like you believe that you and Joker are equal partners, right? You're the Joker's partner in all of this, right? You're his friend. Like you believe that's what's going on here, but you don't know the Joker. There's a reason why the entire criminal underworld felt fear when the Joker got out of Arkham Asylum. There's a reason why we're scared of that guy, man. There's a reason why we give him a wide berth, right? He's like, because what's going to happen is that the Joker is going to kill you, right? Like you are involved with a sick man who will see you die. He will stand over your body with your blood on his hands, and I promise you, he will laugh. Not because your death means nothing to him, but because death for him is the punchline. And he's like, you don't understand this, man. Maybe we can work out some kind of an arrangement. Maybe we can be friends. And there's a point where Johnny almost considers it, right? Where like he almost kind of goes with that idea. But what you do is you transition over to the Joker once Johnny goes back. He never tells the Joker about his meeting with Two-Face. And the whole instance here of like Johnny meeting with Joker is done for the purpose of Joker meeting with the Riddler. Now the Riddler has a very small part in this story, right? It's not lengthy by any standard of measurement, right? It's really just more of kind of a weapons exchange. What's also cool about this is like the Riddler isn't really afraid of the Joker, or at least if he is, he's not putting off the air that he's afraid of him. If anything, he just kind of considers the Joker to be nonsensical. Now, this could just all kind of be a front, but the fact is, like, goods are exchanged, right? A case is taken by the Joker, money's given to the Riddler, and like, that's it, right? They basically just kind of part their ways, and it's nothing more than that. What follows as the Joker and Johnny and Killer Croc and all of them are leaving is they're suddenly ambushed by these crooked cops who start shooting their car up, and then of course the car crashes. Now, of course, Killer Croc and those guys basically survive, but Joker and Johnny take off running, and you have this massive shootout that goes on between these crooked cops that were hired by Harvey Dent and Joker and Johnny. Finally, the cop that initially met with Johnny and told him that he didn't really know what he was getting into, the guy shows up, right? Which I imagine maybe Harvey Bullock, it may be James Gordon, I don't know. The guy isn't really given a name that I'm aware of here, or at least not that I noticed. I may have missed it. But the important thing is that like this guy has the Joker dead to rights, right? I mean, like it's in his crosshairs, and Johnny kills the cop, right? Like blows this guy's head off and saves the Joker's life. And so what it's done is it's earned the trust of the Joker in a way that hadn't really been done before. And so following that, right, like Two-Face goes out from his palatial estate, grabs his newspaper, blood's dripping on his head, and he realizes like that cop has just been laid there by the Joker. It's basically the opening salvo, because following that attempt on Joker's life, Joker goes to war against Two-Face. He takes out every business that Two-Face collects money from. He kills every guy that answers to Two-Face. And so ultimately, Harvey calls a ceasefire, and him and Joker meet at Gotham Zoo. And there's a kind of in-between here, right, where they sort of go back and forth, and there's a little bit of banter and different things like that. And so in order to implement some leverage, that Two-Face brings in Shelly, right? Like the chick that used to be Johnny's girl. And one of the things that happens is Joker's like, do you know this girl? Right? And so where Two-Face turns and talks to Johnny, he refers to him as Mr. Frost. Now from the Joker's perspective, there's no reason for Two-Face to know who Johnny is by name, because honestly, he just wouldn't be important enough. And so in noticing this, the Joker's like, do you know the Harveys, Johnny? And like, Harvey's just like, I mean, we met. Oh, he didn't tell you? What a surprise. How crazy, right? And so like, it's one of those things where Johnny's like, that girl is my wife. I haven't signed divorce papers yet, but she's essentially my ex-wife, right? And so like, what happens is Joker's like, I didn't realize that either of you were married, right? And so where Two-Face was trying to pull the rug out from the Joker and trying to strong arm him, the Joker in turn strong arms Two-Face. Now, as far as I'm aware, we don't find out what's in the case, but the case specifically that had been attained by the Joker seemingly has something that he can use to blackmail Two-Face. And so it's kind of nuts because being in this zoo and watching everything that goes on, there's a point where Two-Face goes to make a phone call and the Joker swipes at Two-Face's wrist, only for us to find out he basically put razor blades in his fingers, which is wildly twisted. And so of course, this leads to Two-Face's guys pulling his guns, and then they're all sprayed down, right? They're all killed. The reason why was because Harley Quinn was sitting there in the zoo the entire time in a gorilla costume, and Two-Face's guys were none the wiser, which it made perfect sense because the Joker's the one that picked up or chose this place for the meetup. And like, Harley Quinn has a Tommy gun, right? She killed everybody there. And like, one of these monkeys goes to attack Two-Face, and Joker's just like, hands off the merchandise, and like attacks this baboon, right? And so like, what ends up happening is the Joker tells him like, you're my cash register now, right? Like, you work for me. Like, that's it, right? You do what I tell you to. And so he just kind of makes it clear in no uncertain terms and walks away. So any leverage that Two-Face may or may not have had over the Joker is irrelevant here because the Joker doesn't care about anything other than just power for power's sake. The reality here is that it's all just a means to an end to draw out Batman. And so as they walk away, the Joker just tells Johnny, right, get Shelly, get your lady, bring her with us. And so once the Joker's finished with Shelly, if you get my drift, like he just tells Killer Croc, like, give her some money. And he's like, how much? And he's like, whatever you think she was worth. And he's like, that should make us even, right? Like, you cheated on me, Johnny, so I used your girl for a period of time. And like, that's it. And so following that, the Joker just goes on a killing spree, right? He literally just drives through town and just stops at liquor stores, things like that, and starts massacring people. And then just kind of just starts going off on this tangent and sort of losing his mind and screaming and hollering and all that kind of nonsense. And then he calms down and starts talking to Johnny. And it's this very twisted, albeit incredibly insightful conversation between the two. Because the Joker is like, do you know what I hate, Johnny? And Johnny's just like, I mean, everything. And the Joker's like, wow, man, like, it's a lot that you've learned. He was like, or you're smarter than you look. And by that, I'm not saying that you're right. He's like, you are close though. I'll give you that. Why do you hate yourself? And Johnny's just like, I don't know what you're talking about. And the Joker's like, don't kid a kidder. And Johnny goes to apologize. Now, one of the things that had happened is he had apologized to the Joker earlier in the story, and the Joker told him, never apologize for how you look or for being who you are, which is kind of an important lesson, even though it's coming from a really twisted and screwed up guy. And that's why the Joker asked, didn't I tell you to never apologize? And the response of Johnny is, yeah. And the Joker's like, then don't. And Johnny says, you don't get it, Joker. I am sorry. And so it's weird because there's a Batman signal that shot out there for the world to see. And the Joker's like, I can't think of a worse way to die. And I know all of the bad ways, inside and out. My friend, Johnny, what I hate more than everything is apologies. And so this basically changes the way the Joker sees Johnny now. And that'll come to a head once we get towards the end. But what happens is this bat signal that's put out there is not done by Commissioner Gordon. It's done by Two-Face. Batman shows up and meets with Two-Face and is like, you have to do something. You have to stop him. He said he figured out a way to kill us. You have to find a way to stop him. And so the first thing that happens is Batman shows up and takes out Harley Quinn. And so when the Joker shows up to like where Harley Quinn's apartment is, you basically have him realizing the window's been broken, and he's just like, okay, That's it. And so what the Joker does is he tells this really interesting story along the way, right? And this is kind of a story to explain why it is that he's so insane. And he's like, do you want to hear something funny? And Johnny's like, I mean, I guess. He says, when I was on the inside, I met a man who was obsessed with driving a car around the world in one day. He swore up and down that he could do it. And he tried to many times from what I understand. At the end of those failed days, he'd sit on the side of the road, cursing his bad luck. Eventually, a good Samaritan would stop. After slaughtering the Samaritan and anybody else that was with him, his wife, his children, whatever, he'd put them in his car, set it on fire, and drive off in their car. Then he'd fill up the tank and wait on the sun so he could try to drive around the world again. And where Johnny's like, he never made it, the response of Joker is no, he was gone. But that's not the point. And where Johnny's is kind of like, I mean, I assume there is one, the response of Joker is, you don't get it, do you, Johnny? He blamed the cars for his failures. It never once crossed his mind that what he believed he could do was impossible. I admire that. I really do. And there's a lot of interpretations for this, right? That Joker sees Batman's perception of trying to stop him impossible, but Batman keeps doing it anyway, right? That Batman tries to put Joker away as if this dance between the two of them can end, but it never can. But as Joker realizes that Batman's gotten to Harley Quinn, he goes to where Killer Croc is, only to find out that Batman has taken out Killer Croc, right? Incapacitated these guys. And so in turn, Joker's just kind of like, all right, let's have some fun. He literally creates a Molotov cocktail, throws it into a building, and is like, this place belongs to me. And in his insanity, he just takes off running. And it seems like he's crying, but while he's crying, Johnny's laughing, almost as if he's being infected by the Joker. And the Joker just turns around and backhands this guy, right? And it's just like, shut up. Right? He's like, you disgust me. You have no charm at all. Just obviousness, right? You're dumb, you're dull, and you're disappointing. You're just obvious. Now, of course, Batman finally catches up to him, and then Joker holds Johnny hostage with a gun to his head. And this is when Johnny starts to realize he was never the Joker's friend. He was never the Joker's partner. And he's like, everybody knows that you're obvious. Everybody knows how boring and lame you are. But it's not even Johnny that he's actually talking to. When he's calling him obvious and going on this rant, he's actually talking about Batman. And so what happens is that he says, like, you leave that little window in your mask, right? That little bit of perfection. You run around acting like you're a monster draped in black, but you show the bottom of your face and that little bit of perfection, a glimpse of the chiseled good looks, not the jaw, the mouth of a monster. Why do you let it be seen? Tell me why. And the response of Batman is to mock you. And the Joker just freaks, shoots Johnny through the chin, right? Blows it off. And Johnny's just laying there bleeding while Joker and Batman fight on the bridge. And he just kind of crawls a little bit and ultimately falls off the bridge, quote unquote. It seems like he dies, which Batman Damned actually seems to contradict this. But the cool thing is that, like, Johnny finally comes to the realization that he was never the Joker's friend. That the Joker really is a sickness. He's really a disease, because the focus shifts away from Joker and Batman. And instead, it's Johnny realizing the Joker is the bad guy. And the only way that the Joker can really be stemmed in any measurable way is because of Batman, which of course leads to Johnny just falling off the bridge and into the water. So if you want to continue the story, check out this video that we have here called Batman Damned, which actually is the direct sequel to this. So with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this video to an end. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.